I spent 63 years proving my father wrong, and little by little, I became him anyway. I'm 79 years old, and I want to tell you something. If you want to escape the shadow of the home that raised you, hate is not enough. Running is not enough. Even building a life that looks completely different on the outside is not enough. If that wound is still alive deep down in you, it will find another voice. I know that because I lived it. My father was the kind of man you felt before you saw him. The truck in the driveway, boots on the porch, keys hitting the table. Even the air in the house seemed to tighten when he walked through the door. And to be fair, he wasn't some cartoon villain. He worked hard, he paid the bills, he fixed what was broken. Outside the house, people respected him. They called him dependable, solid, a real man. But inside that house, everything bent around his moods. My mother bent around his moods. Supper bent around his moods. Me and my brother learned to bend around his moods too. I remember one night when I was about 16, my mother had kept dinner warm because he was late again. The biscuits had gone a little hard. He sat down, took one bite and said, "Can't anything in this house be done right?" He didn't have to yell. That was the thing. He didn't have to break a plate or slam his fist on the table. One sentence from him could suck the light right out of a room. I looked at my mother's face that night, and something in me hardened. Right there in that kitchen, I told myself, I will never be that man. Never. I carried that vow out of that house like it was gospel. I left home young with one bag, a little money, and more anger than sense. For a long time, that anger felt useful. It pushed me to work, pushed me to build, pushed me to become the opposite of him. I didn't drink like he did. I didn't shout like he did. I didn't make scenes. I married a good woman. I raised two children. I paid the mortgage. I came home. I stayed sober. I kept food on the table. On paper, I looked nothing like my father, and I measured myself with the kind of simple scorecard wounded people love. He drank. I didn't. He shouted. I didn't. He ruled with fear. I didn't. So I told myself I had won. What I didn't understand back then and what I know now is this. Just because you don't repeat the behavior doesn't mean you pulled out the wound. You can bury a thing without healing it, and buried things have a way of talking through you. I never yelled the way my father yelled, but my children still learned to study my face. I never came home drunk, but my family still knew when the room had to adjust around me. I never slammed my fist on the table, but disappointment lived in my voice like it paid rent there. My son used to wait for me by the front window when he was little. My wife, Evelyn, told me that years later. She said he'd hear my car and run to the glass like I was the best part of his day. That should have broken me. But by the time I got through the door, I was usually too tired to be gentle. He'd say, "Dad, watch this." And I'd say, "In a minute." My daughter would bring me a drawing, and before I told her it was beautiful, I'd ask if she'd finished her homework. If something spilled, I sighed. If something broke, I went cold. If they did well, I moved the finish line. I told myself I was teaching discipline. I told myself I was making them strong. That is another lie wounded people tell themselves. We say we're preparing our children for the world. Sometimes what we're really doing is handing them the same tension we were raised in and calling it character. Evelyn tried to tell me before life had to tell me harder. One night she looked at me and said, "You don't have to raise your voice. The children can hear your disappointment from 3 rooms away." I got defensive right away. Of course I did. Honest language is dangerous when a man has spent his whole life protecting the wrong story about himself. I told her, "I'm not my father." And she said, "I know. That's what scares me. You think quieter means better." I hated hearing that. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. Still, I did what most people do. I kept going. I kept working. I kept providing. I kept telling myself love was understood. But love that is never really felt doesn't heal much. Years passed. The children grew. And if you're a parent, let me tell you something painful. Your children can respect you for 20 years and still never feel safe enough to rest around you. Respect is not the same as rest. Fear is not the same as respect. Provision is not the same as warmth. The day the truth finally caught up to me. My grandson was 8 years old. We were at a birthday party. Cake, paper plates, too much sugar, too much noise, just a regular family day. Then he knocked over a cup of punch. It spread across the table and onto the floor. And before I could even think, I snapped at him. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't do any of the things my father used to do. But that little boy froze. His shoulders tightened up. His eyes dropped. He waited to find out how dangerous the room had just become. And in that moment, I saw it. Different storm, same cold. Later, my son came outside and stood next to me. He was calm when he said it, which somehow made it hit even harder. He said, "Dad, you didn't give us Grandpa's thunder. You gave us his winter." That was the sentence. And if someone has ever spoken one true sentence over your life at exactly the right moment, then you know what I mean. It doesn't hit your ears first. It hits your bones. Because he was right. My father used noise. I used distance. My father used rage. I used disappointment. My father made the house loud. I made it careful. But the result was a whole lot closer than I ever wanted to admit. That's why I'm telling you this now. Too many people still measure healing the wrong way. They say, "I'm better than my mother. I'm better than my father." Maybe you are. Maybe you truly are. But better is not the same as healed. If the child inside you is still scared, still ashamed, still performing for love, still reading faces, still bracing for rejection, then sooner or later, that child is going to start speaking through your adult mouth. He'll speak to your wife. He'll speak to your husband. He'll speak to your children. He'll sit down at your dinner table and turn small mistakes into heavy moments. That's how pain survives generations. Not always through abuse, sometimes through atmosphere, sometimes through tone, sometimes through the long shadow of never feeling fully safe with the people who love you most. So what do you do with the truth like that? First, you stop congratulating yourself for not becoming the worst version of where you came from. That bar is too low. Second, you name what happened to you. Not so you can blame forever, not so you can stay stuck, but because unnamed wounds do not disappear. They run your life from the shadows. Third, you learn a new language before the people you love become fluent in your pain. Tell your son you're proud of him before he starts performing for it. Tell your daughter she's safe with you, not just corrected by you. Tell your spouse the truth while there's still time to soften. And if love has always felt tense in your body, get help before you start calling that tension normal. I'm an old man now, old enough to admit something that used to shame me. I loved my family deeply, and I still gave them a version of me they had to be careful around. That is a hard sentence to say, but once you finally tell the truth, something else becomes possible. Not perfection, not erasing the past, but softness, repair, maybe even a different ending than the one you were handed. After that party, I called my son. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I just said, "You were right. I loved you. I just didn't know how to make that love feel warm." He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "I know you loved us, Dad. I just wish you had known it sooner." That sentence still lives in me. So if you remember nothing else from this old man, remember this. It is not enough to avoid becoming your parents on the surface. You have to take their pain out of your hands, out of your voice, out of your timing, and out of your silence. Otherwise, you will hand the same winter to people who were hoping to get spring from you. I spent 63 years proving my father wrong. What I should have done was heal the part of me that still thought his weather was normal. Anyway, I'm getting a little tired now, and I think I've earned myself a cup of coffee. If you want to hear more of this old man's little talks, stick around, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.